that give you probably better information on how to deal with a lie detector test, should you for some reason want to do that. So now I'm going to conclude finally, so we can ask some questions. So if you have these practical techniques and the awareness of the situation, you'll have the tools you need to avoid being the victim of expert advice that isn't right for you. You have the power to take control of your life, to say no to bad advice, pressures to conform, scam artists, or demands for inappropriate obedience. Yes, we haven't talked about that yet. Every individual, including you, has the power to stand up effectively to experts and authorities. You just have to make the choice to do it. Now, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Okay, questions.
Big deal for questions.
Oh, come on, you must have some questions. Yes.
Yeah, your point 17 says ask, are you being treated fairly? Can you elaborate on that point?
Yeah, that can be tricky because you may not always know. But if you're being rushed and you don't think in a situation where maybe that isn't appropriate, that would be unfair. If you have any hint based on what they say or even the expert's body language that they're not taking you seriously, whether it's because you're young or black or woman or whatever it might be, or wearing jeans or whatever it could be, or you have tattoos or whatever. If you sense that, that would be a sign of unfairness. So if if you have any clue that you're not being taken seriously, or that they're trying to rush you through and get rid of you, those would be the main examples of unfairness.
All right, any questions?
Are you familiar with an organization called Oath Keepers?
Vaguely have heard of them, I don't remember
They're
too much.
started by a constitutional lawyer who's formerly Army Airborne. His name is Stuart Rhodes, oathkeepers.org. And just want to relate an incident really quick. 3 weeks ago, a San Diego police officer, I approached him actually to talk to him about this organization. And basically it's saying you take an oath, you're supposed to maintain that oath. And there's, due to a lot of disinformation and so forth, a lot of law enforcement and soldiers and military types are disobeying constitutional concepts. And anyway, with this particular incident, he goes to reach for his taser, and I'm like, we're not in Fullerton, officer. I don't know if I mean,
Yeah.
what happened up there.
Or Oakland, yeah.
And basically, I encourage everybody to learn about oathkeepers.org and share that information with anybody in law enforcement, firefighters, any of the sheep, military definitely, veterans, etc., the sheepdog community.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of information out there that's helpful. I have, in my book, I have, at the end of each chapter, actually, I have places to look for further information, both websites and books. There actually is a lot out there once you start looking, at least in certain areas. Not in every area. There's not a lot about how to deal with lawyers. I had to actually interview a lawyer because I only found one book. Well, I found two books, the NOLA book that I quoted and one other book. But there actually are a lot of resources. Like for beating traffic tickets, NOLA has a book. And if you look on the web, you'll find all sorts of websites about how to beat a traffic ticket. So there are many resources out there if you just look, both in terms of websites and books. Yeah.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. A lawyer at the Cato Institute started a nonprofit recently called The Right to Record, which is really cool because because normally people who record policemen are pretty frantic and they don't really make like a good argument when they're doing it.
Yeah.
But he's making an academic argument for why we should be allowed to record policemen in action, which is really
Most
cool.
definitely are a recorded photograph.
it's kind of like breaking new ground in academic circles. That important.
Yeah, those kinds of things are good. There, like I said, there really is a lot of information out there. Yeah.
Well, sort of, I guess I'm seeing a theme going on here that social media and technology is sort of chipping away at the information authority.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I mean, look what happened in Egypt. You know? It is making a tremendous amount of difference. Yes, the authorities can't fool us the way they used to be able to, because we have access to more information more easily than ever before in history.
We're losing it too due to a lot of censorship on the internet.
Well, yeah, the censorship is coming. That's the trouble, because governments are figuring out that the social media are calling their number, huh? And so, yeah, I think that they really badly want to control the internet. And you all know why. I don't have to explain it to you.
James, you had a question as well?
Yeah, so like in the example you gave of the black woman at the doctor's office, obviously women and minorities and so on, they often have to wear business suits or uniforms or symbols of power in order to I suppose reach a level of acceptance of authority that I suppose men would usually have, for example, and so obviously that's a social problem, whether it be socially inculcated or inherent in psychology. So what are some ways or empirically demonstrable techniques that would help overcome this type of I suppose social inequality being the term I would hesitate to use.
For people who have trouble being assertive, there are many good books on assertiveness. Occasionally you find assertiveness training classes through the Y or something, but unfortunately I just forgot the name of it, but there's one book that I recommend. Heck, I'll just look it up. It's really good on that about being assertive, if that's one of your issues.
Well, I suppose if you control for assertiveness, is there an observable difference in whether or not women or men are being perceived as authority?
Oh yeah, there sure is. I can tell you that the research is real clear. Women are less likely to be perceived as experts or authorities than men. Yeah, period. There's too much research. There's a journal in psychology called the Journal of Social Issues back a few years ago, devoted a whole issue to women in leadership. It doesn't matter how competent you are. Women have a much harder time being perceived as competent leaders, even when they are, because there's still plenty of prejudice and stereotypes out there. You all know that. Oh yeah, it's out there.
And so do you know do you have any thoughts or know of any research on how people can go out and possibly change that social field?
Well, talking about it is the first step. Reading the research is certainly in a business setting. You would try to convince the Human Resources Department to perhaps have some workshops or whatever to deal with it. Awareness, as they've done with issues of sexual harassment, is for many years people, particularly men, I'm sorry to say, certainly not all men, didn't realize what they were doing was offensive to women, or they figured they could get away with it. Well, that's changing. I mean, perhaps it's being overdone, but that's another issue. So awareness, because I gotta say, libertarians are not the most psychologically minded people out there. I've been fighting this battle for many years.
Not the what?
Libertarians in general are very bad about understanding that psychology matters, that psychology has a lot to offer that will help deal with social problems. It has a tremendous amount. And in fact, one of the books that I want to write in the future, I'm lining them up unfortunately, is The Psychology of Freedom. and I actually started a Facebook page, along with my Facebook page on women resistance to authority, which is my current book I'm working on. So psychology has a lot to say about, so making people aware of the research that shows this. And because some women in business are in a damned if they do and damned if they don't position. If they appear too masculine, they'll be put down for being quote unquote too masculine. If they're too feminine, they won't be taken seriously. What do? So, yeah, awareness is the first step. In whatever way you can. In a student setting, you talk to your friends, have people come in and talk, whatever it might take. So awareness is the first step. And then, depending on, if you go out into the business world, then things can be done there with workshops and so forth. But libertarians need to get more psychologically savvy, because one of the promising signs is this whole new area of economics, behavioral economics. So maybe you know about that. It's about time, this idea that people make rational decisions about economic decisions. Hello, what universe are you in? Psychologists have known for many, many, many decades that people aren't always rational. Hello. And people are not necessarily rational. In other words, you know the standard libertarian arguments where they say, oh, the market will take care of it when we have a free market. Liberals know that's lame, and they're right. It's not enough, because the culture has to change too. People have to stop basing their evaluations of other people on stereotypes, whether it's gender or race or age or appearance.
Those libertarians are just all crazy nuts.
No, well, I don't think so, but...
No, I don't think either. I'm sharing that as an example.
Well, yeah, that's right, that's right. If you give a lame answer like that, the non-libertarians will laugh at you as well they should. If we had more time, I could rant on that a little longer, but I think we're probably running short of time, so take another question.
Last question.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask you, because you were talking a lot about social psychology earlier, assuming that libertarianism is a forum for which people with different values can kind of come together and talk about political authority over others and the distribution of political power over others, assuming that's what libertarianism is, do we really see a robust social psychology scene in libertarianism? I understand political psychology being important to libertarianism, but in the spirit of libertarianism, does social psychology really fit when it doesn't really talk about the distribution of power over others, which is kind of the uniting factor among libertarians?
What do you think the Milgram experiment is?
I think it's important. I'm asking you.
No. I mean, that's social psychology. Yes, it's telling us many important things about power. For one thing, it's telling us enough to know how we can begin to combat power by making people more aware of how they give in to authority because of things going on in the situation. That's very powerful information. It's very relevant. But and also, by the way, if you go to this website, rit.org, I have there, if you look, a couple of articles on follow-ups to the Milgram experiment, and I talk about personal factors that help people resist authority. Tremendous implications just in that. Because I did my Ph.D. dissertation on a study of political resistors to authority. And one of the things that came up clearly in the literature as well as in my study, the importance of moral values. The people who resist authority, like the Christians who rescued Jews from the Nazis in World War II, they lived their values. They didn't just go to church on Sunday and didn't think about it the rest of the week. They believed in their moral values. It's a moral value to help others. And there's a whole literature about teaching children moral values, teaching them empathy. Because empathy is the keystone to being able to make good moral judgments that don't result in harm to other people. And there was a whole literature in psychology, in this case developmental psychology, on how to raise children who will be critical of authority and who will have good moral values and not be less likely to harm others, who make more sophisticated moral judgments and decisions. And all of this is coming out of psychology. Psychology has a lot to tell us about how to create the conditions that will make a freer world. And that's why I'm going to write that book. And I have a Facebook page for that, the Psychology of Freedom. And so I'm starting to discuss some of those ideas there.
All right, well, say thank you again to Dr. Presley. There's enough interest, we can have an after social. If people just want to go and hang out, we can probably head over to the pub if anyone wants to. That's what I'm normally doing. But